The translation of intent into gameplay is our next topic, and I think it slots in pretty smoothly
Hmm.
here, since we were just talking
Absolutely.
about stuff like that. Um, why don't you give us your kind of just overview of this concept?
Right. So, what I mean by translation of game of intent into gameplay is that when you expect to do something, when you wish to do something, when you wish to pull off an action or, uh, trigger part of your move set, you want to get from one place to another with a single control, a single bind. You want to jump, you want to eject, you want to swing, you want to vault. You tell the game to do it, and it does it whenever you told it so.
Hmm.
So into this, come in the concepts of cancelability and omnidirectionality and just general every single aspect of these games that adds to freedom also adds to your ability to translate intent into gameplay. Of
Yeah.
course, for that you also assume that you have proper targeting systems so that it's not Unity or that you're gonna actually have an eject trigger once you press the button and not be told no. It also assumes that if you tell the game to do something unsafe, the game assumes you want it to do it.
Like it respects your decision instead of trying to
Respects
like
your
protect
decision and
you.
lets you do something that would potentially end up in fall damage. Because the moment AC started holding your hand and being safer, it didn't only make for an automation of something that you would never do. It didn't simply stop you from things that you would never want to do. It started locking you out of genuine like
Useful
combos and
options.
different interactions that you can employ,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to safe jumps. I mean, in Unity, for example, you can't do an unsafe side eject, right?
No,
You
no,
can
you
only
can't.
eject onto context.
Yeah.
And the problem is, okay, if Unity had a proper ledge grab, what could I do with this eject? I could eject to the side unsafely and then re-grab the wall and then get somewhere from there.
Yeah.
What does Unity let you do? Nothing. It doesn't. It
Yeah,
just doesn't let
because
you
you
do it.
can't do the action in the first place.
Yep. And another piece of like feeling like your intent is translated into gameplay is simply being able to trust that what you're telling the game to do is going to be reliable, consistent, and that it's going to, act the same every single time you approach a certain context.
Yeah.
Consistent jump distances, consistent eject distances, knowing when you're going to end up in a hang versus where you're going to, like when you're going to end up in a foot landing. All of this is really important,
Hmm.
at least to me.
I think an interesting kind of like note on that is when you think about like AC1 to Rev, for example, like the first four games, when if you're just holding auto parkour and you're like pathing through object chains, the distance of jumps, it's kind of based on whatever is in front of you, right? Like whatever you're
Yep.
about to like path into. But when you tap out a manual jump when you're on the ground or like a flat surface or a rooftop, your jump distance is always the same.
Yeah, it's a
And
baseline
so
jump distance that you can trust.
yeah, exactly. And so basically you have these moments where you're like, I can kind of like a lot of AC Wonder Rev movement is you're loosely like bound to this kind of like grid, right?
Yep.
But you can break out of that grid in any angle, in any direction, at any time you want with like a manual jump input.
And the game respects your
And
wish to do so.
it lets you do it. And then from that, because you have catch ledge, that's kind of like the other part of the sandwich, where it's like first I can jump in any direction anytime I want, and then once I've done that, I can, finish my sentence, so to speak, by regrabbing something, in proximity. And so it's such a simple equation, it's just like 1 plus 1 equals 2. But when you combine it together and you layer it on top of like the grid movement, it's like really, really versatile. Like there's a lot of like ways you can kind of just approach situations, and obviously it ties into stealth and combat as well. Like these aren't just movement games, they just happen to place a premium on movement in the sense that being good at movement in AC used to make it so that you were like you were in a way better position to take advantage of like every other system,
And you were way
basically.
faster, and it just played directly into the fantasy of being an assassin. Because an assassin is someone who's, by definition, well, the traditional idea of an assassin, the hooded guy
Yeah.
with a hidden blade, the field operative.
Yeah.
You expect them to be good at parkour.
Yeah, you
You
do.
expect them to be able to consistently do what they wish to do.
Mhm.
And once you can kind of immerse yourself into that as the player and play the game and translate your intent into an action, reliably so, it feeds into the fantasy, makes you feel like the assassin.
Yeah. And what was really cool about like the classic games as well, and I bring this up every time, is it also tied into the philosophy of Brotherhood Assassins. So, like the whole leap of faith thing, the whole thinking for yourself thing, nothing is true, everything is permitted. All of that
Oh
is
yeah.
actually expressed in parkour because when you're a new player, you're maybe unsure of yourself, you're not very confident, right? You
Yeah.
maybe don't understand that nothing is true and everything is permitted. So you just kind of hold high profile and legs and you're auto pathing through object chains and you're having a good time. But then when you start realizing, like nothing is true and everything is permitted, like I can eject here. Like yes, it's unsafe. If I mess it up, I'll kill myself and desynchronize, but I can do it and then I can catch ledge. And now I'm doing things that, people bound to like the loose grid system, like they're not accessing, they're not doing. You're doing things that like the guards can't do because guards can do basic movement in
Yeah.
classic AC. Like that's how they can chase you and stuff. They can't climb vertical surfaces, but they can do jumps and they can pull up onto
Or
objects.
they can't eject, for example, so that already, gives you a
Yeah,
significant advantage.
yeah, and I thought that was something that was really interesting. The better you get at like freeing your mind, the more of a leg up you have over your enemies, which is literally like the definition of a Brotherhood assassin, like
It's
philosophically.
the creed.
Yeah, it's literally the Assassin's Creed.
And I think movement in AC, why movement is so strong in AC, and why it makes a good AC game is because parkour is always bound to be the one branch of AC gameplay that can most closely resonate with the creed. You're breaking free of the constructs that surround you, of the streets below you, of the object chains around you. You're applying the fact that nothing is true, nothing that you see is necessarily keeping you boxed in.
Yeah.
Everything is permitted, which means you can break out of these, and the only thing is to make it count. You have to, as Ezio said one day, that one very wise man called Ezio, said that you have to hold and deal with the consequences of what you've done.
Yes, exactly.
And that's what parkour was. If you fucked up, you fucked up. If you
Yeah.
made it, you made it.
And that's how players would get that adrenaline rush where it's like I can do this ego strike. I can jump across this street. I know I can grab this. I know I can catch ledge to save myself, right? Even though if I mess up the timing like 1 second late, I would desync there. Right? Like
Yep,
that's what that meant. Like the consequences of our actions, be they glorious or tragic, right? Like
absolutely.
I love that. I love that about parkour and movement. And I think that's something I really do miss about the games. And to some extent it is like a bit of community like gospel as it were, that like that is how we've like interpreted them over the years, but I don't think it's an accident necessarily. I think that the way the game systems and narrative like intertwined were certainly a lot more like intimate and a lot closer to each other back in the day than they are now.
Absolutely. There's a lot that, I mean, even if the devs never literally said, okay, parkour is going to be the main and most, like, the strongest representation of the creed, the context in which they were working, the philosophies that they applied, even if they weren't directly applied to parkour, ended up leading to this.
Mm-hmm.
They knew they were working on an Assassin's Creed game. They applied the creed and its principles to the protagonists of the time and made them play that way consequently.
Yeah, and it's even in every system. Like combat in AC1 follows the same principles. Where when you're new, when you're unsure of yourself, you're probably going to use your sword most of the time because sword is very easy to counter with. It does pretty good
Yeah.
damage. It has good guard. You can like block with it for a long time, right? But
Mm.
then as you get really, really good and very confident, as you realize nothing is true and everything is permitted, like what's the strongest weapon in AC1 but the hardest one to use? It's the hidden blade, right? And
Ooh, the
like
hidden blade and shock and awe chain.
yeah, shock and awe chains. Now you're not even like you're fighting like not even by doing combat. You're just like assassinating people. Like what? Like that's not fighting, right? Like but nothing is true and everything is permitted. Other video games tell you that when you're fighting a final boss, like you have to abide by the fact that he has tons of health and like goes through all these phases, but
Yep.
nothing is true and everything is permitted. If you counter kill the true Al Mualim, you just skip the entire fight because you use your hidden blade and you just kill him
I love
instantly.
that so much. I fucking love that they just explicitly just allowed you to do so.
Yeah,
I love it.
and it just makes so much sense. Like it's one of those things where the game simply just operates by its rules, right? Like
Yep.
I love stuff like that. Like I think those create these moments of like ludic poetry almost, like, which
Yep.
is just amazing, and it's something I've always loved.
I think one other important thing to mention, and this feeds more into the point of why do we love this parkour in this system, is also the fact that it just systemically lets you do everything that is within the sort of universal capability of an assassin. Maybe it's not realistic, but it's grounded in what an assassin can and should do,
Yeah,
and it spans very wide. Maybe, in real life, you're not going to make a height gaining, foot landing side eject most of the time.
yeah,
Like 99% of the time, you just don't have the conditions to do so. But it makes sense for an assassin to push slightly above the bar of a normal human
yeah. That's what
and to
makes them
like give you this
assassins.
freedom. And this freedom expands into such a wide and functional move set that you can just do just about anything. Everything is permitted.
Yeah, everything is permitted. It's awesome. I love it so much. It's something I sorely miss. Yeah.
So do I, man.